Okay, you should be able to see my front screen now. All right, guys. First of all, I'll just introduce myself again. My name's Suzie Collins. I'm a clinical psychologist, and today's presentation is going to be about emotional regulation. So to start off with, we're just going to have a bit of a look at what we're going to cover for tonight. So to start off with, we're actually going to look at, what is emotional intelligence to start with. Then we will explore the steps that are involved in developing emotional intelligence, and then including specifically around the emotional regulation aspect of that. And then I'll also talk a little bit about Theraplay and the concepts that we use within that model of therapy to support children and their emotional regulation to build their emotional intelligence. So that's what we're going to start with today. So let's actually start with, what is emotional intelligence? And I guess the definition that we have is it's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, as well as the emotions of others, to help guide thinking and behaviour effectively. And so that's what we're going to have a look at. We're going to break it down a little bit into those steps, and we're going to have a look at that recognise and understand and manage aspects of things. So let's, though, go back to the beginning and let's look at, people often use the word emotions, sometimes they use the word feelings, and if we go back into some really past history, they even use the term passions. And, all of those terms have been used for centuries to describe what's going on within a human being. And as mentioned there, it's the early Greek philosophers who actually talked about passions. And our emotions actually play a really large part in human behaviour and how we act based on those sensations, feelings, emotions that we might be experiencing. And if we come to understand some of the what emotions are or where they come from, if we can have some better understanding of that, we're better able to actually manage things and manage life in general. So that's what we're going to explore a little bit further. And when we have a look at emotional intelligence, there's a range of skills that we need to cover, and they're actually a bit progressive. So to start off with, we want to make sure that young people have the ability to have just some emotional awareness, just that awareness that we even actually have emotions. The next step is to have a bit of an understanding about what they are, what makes them different, how do we differentiate between them, and some other things around understanding, and we'll talk about each of these shortly. The next skill that we want to develop is actually empathy skills. Empathy skills are really important as we build to what we call emotional regulation. So they're the 4 areas we're actually going to have a look at initially. So let's start off with the emotional awareness. So this is the ability to be able to recognise our own and other people's emotions. And so we can do that in 3 different steps within that. So the first one is we actually want to be able to identify the emotion. The second step is noting that emotions can actually fall on a continuum or an intensity scale. So we're going to have a look at how we can ensure that our young people are aware of the intensity that emotions can have. And then we want to be able to actually express that emotion. So all of those 3 things fall under emotional awareness, and we're going to look at each of those too. So the first part, identifying the emotions, we want to actually be able to name it. There are so many out there. And to start off with, and particularly when we think about ages of people and our young people that we're focusing on in this presentation for you guys, is really about just starting with those basics. And our 4 basic emotions are happy, sad, angry, and scared. Some families use some different language that might describe that. Happy might also be used with glad or joy. Angry might also be used with mad or cranky. And and it's up to you. Each family can decide which language you want to use, but we want to particularly start with some really basic stuff from a really young age. And then as they get older, we can expand that language to include some more. And so as a bit of an example of how many there are actually out there, I use this particular emotions wheel. And so this particular one, if you have a look right in the middle, it actually talks about 7 basic emotions. So we've got happy, surprised, bad, fearful, angry, disgusted, and sad. And as children grow, we can, as I said, expand their language around emotions. So for example, if we look at angry, that's up the right way there. If we look at all the red, as that progresses out, there are just more descriptive words that still describe anger, but sometimes anger just doesn't quite hit the mark, and there's something else that's sitting there. Perhaps it's frustrated, perhaps it's hostile, perhaps it's violated, disrespected. There's a whole range of different emotions. But when we're starting off to teach children about emotions, we just want to start with the basics. That's what we want to be able to do. And to do that with young people, we just want to make sure that we're just using that language every day. So make sure that you as parents or teachers or educators, that you're actually sharing what you're feeling. Gosh, I'm feeling a bit sad that I worked late and didn't get to pick you up early today. Or you might also want to share what others might be feeling. Oh, your bright eyes tell me you might be feeling happy. Is that right? Always checking in with them to see if that's what's going on for them. Other ways of using it on an everyday basis is if you're reading some stories to the children, share what others might be feeling throughout the story. So, for example, you're reading a book and someone falls off his bike, and perhaps you might add some context. You know, oh, he fell off his bike. He might be scared to get back on and try again. So just using that language all the time. Or perhaps you're watching a movie. Gosh, he looks like he's angry. And again, just using the language to support them to do that. We also want to make sure that when we're also expressing what the emotion might be, you can also add to that knowledge or awareness by talking about the body language that's associated with that. And so you might sort of talk about bright eyes, or perhaps a frown on a face, their slumped shoulders, perhaps some tears, arms are crossed, and just the curves of mouths, and describing the different emotions that might be sharing with somebody else. So if we're using it every day, that's going to go a long way to making sure that children are becoming much more aware of emotions and what they are. So the next step is, as I mentioned, is also about sharing the intensity that goes with that. So all of the emotions that we have fall on an intensity level. And again, we need to make sure we're doing this as age appropriate as well. So if we're talking about really young children, we want to be asking if they're feeling a bit sad, are they feeling a little bit sad, or are they really sad? And then as they get older, we can increase that intensity level or that scale. Perhaps we can put 3 in there, a little bit sad, middle sad, or really sad. And as they get older, we might actually use a scale of 1 to 5, or even as they get older, perhaps on a scale of 1 to 10. Or you might actually want to do it from a really visual perspective. And you might have like just the 2 faces, one that's a little bit neutral and then one that's sad. That just shows the 2 intensities at that level. Perhaps if we have a look at the inside out scale there, so this is actually looking at joyfulness, and we can see that there are 5 across there, and they're all still joyful language, but these ones are pleased, cheerful, delighted, elated, or ecstatic, and they're just showing the intensity of that. Or perhaps the next one. So this looks at a whole range of different emotions that might be there: sad, angry, scared, happy, peaceful, powerful, and actually looks at each one and says, gosh, where am I on that temperature gauge, perhaps on that scale of 1 to 10. So really being able to support the young people to understand that they do come in intensity scales and making sure we're using that. And so some examples that you might be able to use, or some examples here. Your child wants to have a toy that a friend has, and perhaps you might want to respond with that with, I can see that you were mad about your friend not sharing. Were you a little bit mad or really mad? Or perhaps, I can see that you are really sad, or if that doesn't quite describe the intensity, more maybe a little bit sad that your friend won't play with you. Or it can be a bit scary the first time you try to walk along the plank, but it won't be as scary once you try it. And then what's really important is to check in on their next try. Are you still feeling a bit scared or just a little bit scared this time? And so they can see that as perhaps they get more familiar with a particular task, that intensity of emotions actually change with that. Another example on there is, actually having the posters around the centre or around the home, and actually asking the child, how strong is this feeling at the moment, or how big is this feeling, and using the scales that you've got there to support them with that. So that's some ways to make sure that children understand that emotions change with intensity. And the next part then is around expressing. So it's really important for a child to be able to express their feelings. And often we actually see it in their actions. And actions are okay as long as they're not hurting someone. So I often use the phrase that, we can be angry, but we can't be aggressive. So it's okay to have the emotion. We just need to check in around what the action or the behaviour is that comes with it. We also want to make sure that we teach them to use their words to express what's going on, not always their actions. So I am angry. But we also want to teach them about what may have happened to elicit that particular emotion. And perhaps an example might be, because Annie took my car. Now, I've got a little bit of a disclaimer that goes with that. We have to be really clear. Because Annie took my car doesn't mean that Annie made me angry. We actually have to be responsible for our own emotions, and no one can make us feel anything. The circumstances created a connection within us, and that connection falls between our thoughts and our emotions and the body sensations that we feel. And all of those things have an impact on us. So what happened is Annie took my car, and I then felt a sensation that we label as mad. And that mad generally comes from some sort of thought or a rule that we had at the time. That is usually something along the lines of, it was mine, I had it first. And this wasn't fair, so I'm going to get angry because it's not fair. But I don't want to get into the specifics of that, because this webinar isn't going to explore that link any further. So I'm going to come back a little bit to, that whole phase of emotional awareness around expressing. So just making sure that they can actually use their words to express what's going on, not just their actions and behaviours. And so that's the last step that comes into those 3 within emotional awareness: naming it, intensity, and the expressing. So now we're going to move into the actual understanding of emotions. So in this section, we want to gather some understanding of our emotions. So we want to know that emotions are created or triggered by some sort of external source. as we just talked about. So whether that's environmental or some sort of internal event that happened within us. We want to also allow people and children to understand that we can actually have more than one feeling at a time or for the same circumstance. And we also want to share that specific feelings affect our body in specific ways. And then we also want to share that feelings can actually change, as we talked about earlier with the plank example. And sometimes we can actually hide our feelings. So let's explore these a little bit further. So emotional understanding. Let's help children understand that there are causes for these. So emotions are labels that we use to describe the sensations that we actually experience in our body. So they're just words, they're just things that, people created to describe what those sensations are. And these sensations are generally triggered or created when something in our environment occurs or some sort of internal experience happens. So let's again have a look at an example. So Tommy wouldn't play with me. So if that's the situation that's gone on, perhaps I had a thought, Tommy doesn't like me, which created some sort of uncomfortable sensation in my body, perhaps a tight chest. And then I had an unconscious response. I don't want to feel like this. And so perhaps I go and tell a teacher that Tommy doesn't want to play with me. So the teacher may ignore this, to which I might think, other people don't listen or help. I have to do this myself. And so then the child might decide to go and hide away and not have to deal with it at all. Or perhaps the teacher might acknowledge the sadness, and then I probably get another internal sensation that says, this is an appropriate reaction to have. The teacher then suggests I go and play with someone or something else. And then I have a thought of, if I don't want to be sad, I can actually go and do something else and then go off and play elsewhere. And then that sensation can go away. And so it's about understanding that we have this cause and effect that goes on about us, and that emotions can change. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But again, we don't want to get too caught up in the cause and effect or the impact side of things. Let's just help our children learn that feelings are a result of things that happen around us, or perhaps internally. And if we take the fall off the bike scenario here again, we might say, he looks sad because he fell off his bike and he's disappointed that he didn't ride it on his own. So just linking those environmental factors to those feelings without them necessarily being cause and effect. I hope that makes sense for you guys. The next part of the emotional understanding is lots at once. So it can actually sometimes be really confusing for young people to have a variety of different emotions from the one experience. So as an example, a parent comes and collects them from the care centre, and so the child might be feeling excited that mum's here, but on the same tone, they might be feeling sad because they have to leave their friends. Or they might even actually be feeling a bit angry that they have to leave in the middle of an activity that they've done. Or another example is maybe the child's going to a sleepover, and so they might feel excited that they get to have takeaway for dinner. Or they might also feel at the same time a little sad because they'll miss their goodnight kiss from dad. So really important to help children understand that it's actually okay to have different feelings for the same situation. We want to also be really mindful in these situations that we don't dismiss what we often refer to as the bad emotion. We often will respond with things, you can't be sad about going on a sleepover, it's going to be fun. And often as parents, again, we dismiss the bad, only offering that they're allowed to feel the good stuff. But it's really important to let them know, gosh, that must be confusing, that you're feeling really sad, but also know that it's going to be fun. And I guess what I mean by good and bad emotions is that actually no emotions are good or bad. They just are. We have them all, and we should experience all of them in a whole range of situations and in a whole range of intensities across our life. It's really important for us to experience the spectrum of all emotions and not dismiss the bad ones and only suggest that they have the good ones. The other part that goes with emotional understanding is looking at the specific sensations that might occur for specific emotions. Now, this slide's probably a little bit tricky for you to read. And in fact, I've got one printed out here in front of me to make it a little bit easier for me to read. So I'm going to have a bit of a look at that. But what you can see in front of you is that it has a look at, again, some 4 basic emotions: joyful, scared, sad, and mad. And it has a look at all the different ways that we might experience different sensations in our body for each of those. Now, what's really tricky is often there's lots of crossovers about these. And that's the bit where it's important for children to be able to recognise, and in fact, adults as well, but to be able to recognise that the different sensations usually do represent different emotions. And there might just be slight, subtle changes that make them different to something else. So, and some of those sensations that we might feel might relate to our breathing, it might relate to our heart rates, it might be about our body temperature that might change, it might talk about fidgeting hands or fingers, our muscles might change from being tense or loose. What else might happen? Our feet and toes might change. Our mouth gets a different sensation within it. Sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's more moist. Sometimes our eyes change, and sometimes it's even the sound, volume, or pitch of our voice as well. And so just helping children understand what that is and how that fits. And so again, you can use some really lovely examples of what's going on for you as well. Gosh, I can hear my voice is really high pitched at the moment. I'm wondering, that might tell me that I'm feeling a bit angry at the moment. And so if we can do really well at making sure we understand our own emotions, we'll go much better at teaching our children how to manage them as well. So having a look at some of those specific sensations. And although there's some examples on those slides there, again, it's about the child being able to understand them, and there might be some slight differences between people as well about what that might be. I think this just summarises what I just said. This is about helping the child identify the sensations in their body and listening to them. And that's actually a really key part. We want to make sure that the child actually listens to these sensations that they're feeling. And some of the really simple ones we can do is, they might get that grumbly tummy sensation, and often that means we're hungry. We might notice the tight fists, and often that's associated with being angry. Or we might have a really heavy chest, and sometimes that can be associated with angry or even scared. And again, we want to be really careful of dismissing those sensations. We often do it, particularly around when a child says, "I'm hungry." And parents, we often will say things like, "No, you're not. It's not lunchtime yet. Go and play." And although that can be really helpful for us as parents, what it doesn't do is it doesn't support your child to trust their own sensations and feelings that are going on for them. And we want to be really mindful of doing that too much. We want to help them to trust what those sensations are and what that might be feeling for them. Okay. So as I mentioned too earlier, the last part around understanding emotions and all that emotions can be is also understanding that we can actually hide our emotions. We can often dismiss them as well. And I guess this is probably a little bit more in the realm about how we pretend at times that we're not actually feeling what we're feeling. We've all had that hard morning at home with our own families, but still turn up for work happy. We know the phrase that's there that says, fake it till you make it. That's okay too. So it is actually okay to hide your feelings from others, but it's really still important to make sure that you acknowledge that the feeling is there to start with. And sometimes it's about helping your child say, yep, I know that you might be feeling really sad at the moment. We still have to go to daycare today. And let's see if we can be really brave and not show so much sadness today. So it still lets them know that they can be hidden without hiding it too much. And I guess it's probably more about allowing them to be hidden without dismissing it. And there's probably a really fine line within that. And that might take a little bit of practice. And again, change. Emotions can change. And we know they do. You know, we don't stay happy forever, and we certainly don't stay angry forever. And our feelings are actually a little bit like seasons. They come and they go, and we just acknowledge them in the moment. And I think that's what's really lovely about feelings and using the sorry, I've lost the word for that. Using the metaphor of seasons to describe them, is that we can't stop them. They are what they are. They come and they go. But we also know that there's a few things that can actually change our feelings. So sometimes if we change our thoughts, there's something that happens in our system that changes perhaps those sensations and our feelings. We know that we can distract ourselves from particular feelings. So we can go for walks, we can go and have something to eat, we can go and have a drink of water. And we can also use some coping skills. And there's some really simple ones around some breathing exercises or even some progressive muscle relaxation exercises that are all good coping skills to help change our emotions. But I guess, you know, that's probably for another webinar to talk about what some of those skills might be. So that brings us to the end of the emotional understanding step. And now we're going to move into the empathy aspect. So empathy, this can actually be really tricky. And I guess one of the biggest parts is to really know the differences between empathy and sympathy. So empathy is that ability to feel with another person, whereas sympathy is that feeling for another person. So sympathy is generally quite detached with limited understanding, whereas empathy is felt with another person. And although it's separate, it allows us then to respond in a really helpful way. Now, Brené Brown actually does a really lovely clip around the differences between empathy and sympathy. So I thought I might just play that with you guys now. Now, let me see if I'm going to get this to work during the presentation. So I'm just going to exit out of the presentation slide and see if this is going to work. And I'm going to click the link.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy
not going to let me
fuels connection.
So hopefully
sympathy
okay.
drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, It's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with "at least." Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me." Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Now let's see if I can make this work. Okay. And so what I think is really lovely about the end of that, where Brené actually says that rarely is something that we say can actually make things better. And so perhaps just connecting is what we need to do. And so that empathy skill is really about helping children to make that connection, either with each other, with other children, or with the adults around them. But it also works the other way. And again, we want to make sure that we are actually demonstrating that with our children as well. And we don't always have to make someone feel better. We can just sit with them and go, "Gosh, that must be really hard." And that's totally okay. That helps build that ability to have good emotional regulation. So that sort of is one of those last steps. And I guess when we think about the age group for the centre here at Little Wonders, is that perhaps we probably don't get to this level around this age. And although we might not get to it at this age, I think it's still really important that you're aware of what the next step is. And there's no reason why we can't continue to educate children that this is an important part of regulating our emotions. So let's have a look at the next part. And this is about co-regulation. So many education models use the theory of I do, we do, you do. So what that means is I do. This is where the child or the student needs to see the parent or the educator doing it. Okay, so we want to make sure that you're demonstrating or modeling these things to the young people. So that's what we start with. You have to do the modeling first. Then the next step is the we do. And so this is the parent and the child, and we do these things together. And then after you've done that together, the child will then have enough confidence to be able to go and do it themselves. And so we want to make sure that we've got the modeling and then the co-regulation before we can ever expect a child to be able to do these things on their own. And with that is what we want to be doing is naming it, measuring it, expressing it. We want to understand causes, environmental or internal. We want to let them know that we can have lots of emotions at the same time and different sensations happen in our body that help us understand the names of those emotions and that those emotions can hide and change. The other part about co-regulation is, again, that emotions are a really normal part of being a human being, as I mentioned. They're okay to have, they're okay to experience. And sometimes those sensations can be really overwhelming. And all we want to do is actually hold some space for these really normal experiences. And when we can do that, children learn that it's actually okay and it's safe to actually experience these emotions. So when a child feels emotionally safe to experience their emotions, they're then better able to regulate them because they know that it's okay to have them, and it's not going to get too big. And I want to show you another clip, and this is about co-regulating. And this is all about creating a safe space for emotions for a toddler, this particular one is. And it's all about making sure that you can be there for them, letting them know that emotions are okay to have, so without interrupting them, and just holding the space for them to have them. And it's also about reminding them that you're there for them in their time of need, but when they're ready. So let's have a quick look at our next video. Let's see if I can do this again. This one. Just going to rewind that a little because we missed the first bit.
Got a pinch of tobacco in my pocket. I'm not gonna roll it, no. I'm not gonna smoke it till we're staring at the stars and the rockets twinkling in the silvery night. 2 sips of whiskey in the flask, but I'm not gonna drink them. I swear I'll make it last till we're drinking out of the same glass again. And though the sand may be washed by the sea, and the old will be lost in the new, well, 4 will not wait for 3. 3 never waited for 2. And though you will not wait for me, I'll wait for you. Got a Polaroid picture in my wallet. I'm not gonna tear it, no, I'm not gonna spoil it. It's an unspoken heartbreak, a heartbroken handshake I'll take with me where I go. And 3 words on the tip of my tongue, not to be spoken or sung or whispered to anyone till I scream them at the top of my lungs again. Though the sand may be washed by the sea, and the old will be lost in the new, well, 4 will not wait for 3. For 3 never waited for 2. And though you will not wait for me, I'll wait for you. Oh, oh. And oh, 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 I'll wait for you, oh, oh, and oh, 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 and I'll wait for you, oh, oh. Got a pinch of tobacco in my pocket. I'm not gonna roll it, no, I'm not gonna smoke it till we're staring at the stars and the rockets twinkling in the silvery night.
So that's just a beautiful little clip. It always lands really heavy every time I watch it. I think it's just a beautiful thing to watch. and just seeing that dad just holding space for that young one, allowing them to have all of the emotions that's going on for them, and just being there and just allowing the child to come to them when they're ready is just really beautiful. And when we think about, that clip went for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. And I think sometimes perhaps when we're in the home environment, that sometimes that 3 minutes, 10 seconds feels like such a really long time. But I just think that's just beautiful how he just created that space for them. So consider that next time you find that one of your children is having a really big emotion and isn't really sure how to manage it or what to do with it. Give them the space, create that safe area for them so they can just experience an emotion that's really normal to have. Okay, so that sort of covers the emotional regulation aspects of tonight's talk. And I just wanted to talk a little briefly, I'm just conscious of the time, around the Theraplay model and the principles that are used in this particular type of therapy. So again, it's about when children are having big emotions, we want to be able to teach them a little better around how to do that. So when we have a look at these 4 pillars of Theraplay, we're going to talk about structure, engagement, nurture, and challenge. And I'm going to have a look at each of those individually for you. And I'm going to, I guess what I want to share about before we jump into that is that in some circumstances, there are some missing links that occur between parents and their infant. And that might happen for a whole range of circumstances that are often out of our control. And when I have a look at this model with you, we're actually going to talk about how an infant and parent relationship is best developed to ensure that we have good, secure attachments. But some of the things that might get in the way of that initially is perhaps some traumatic births. There might be some hospitalizations, whether that's for a parent or the child. Perhaps the parent might have experienced some postnatal depression or psychosis. Perhaps the parent had to return to work earlier than expected or even earlier than wanted to. Or there might just be some other family circumstances that might have occurred that allowed a disruption, I guess, of that parent and infant relationship. So again, let's just have a look at the actual 4 pillars. And the first one is, as I mentioned, structure. And so with this, we're really looking at making sure that as a parent, we can create some really good safety, some organisation of emotions, and then that ability to regulate those emotions. And when we talk about that infant-parent relationship to start with, what we want to be able to have hoped to have happened is that the adult helps the baby to become physically regulated. And we do that by gentle touching. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But the focus is actually on the body. Making sure we're having play activities. We want to make sure we've got sequence that goes on in that. We want rhythm and we want repetition. And we want to make sure that that basic safety, that caregiving and play routines are all predictable things. And so that creates some really organised interaction between the 2 people. If, however, we find that that hasn't actually occurred, in the Theraplay model, we actually work with the adult and the child to allow the adult to actually be in charge of that relationship. And when the adult is actually in charge, it leads to some really lovely reassurance and safety in the relationship. And it also helps then to create the order and that co-regulation that we need. It teaches the child to then also be in control of themselves. It lets them know that they're okay to manage what they're managing within themselves because the parent has taken control of what's going on around them. And it helps that child feel really reassured that there's a progression and a sequence or an order of things that need to happen. So that's structure. And within structure, there's some really lovely benefits. So the benefit that we want to try and develop for the child is that they develop a sense of self-regulation and organisation. They want to feel capable to accept appropriate adult rules and limits. The child learns that adults are trustworthy and predictable, and the child also develops a strong sense of you as the parent. And then the benefit that this gives to the parent is it allows you to have more organised interactions with your child. You can practice setting appropriate limits, become a confident leader with your child, learn to structure in ways that don't involve words or shouting. And it also helps to stimulate your child at a level that they can handle. So communicating to your child that I'm in charge here so you can relax. This is my job to keep you safe. And you can do that with me because I will take good care of you. And that's what structure is designed to do. When we have a look at engagement, this might also look like connection or attunement or affect. And again, if we go back to the infant and parent relationship, what we want to make sure has happened is the parent is really attuned to the baby's state and responds in ways that help the baby to regulate and integrate their emotional states and even their physical states. We want the parent to focus on the baby in a really exclusive way, like really looking at the child and dismissing other environmental things. And that provides that real sensitivity and time soothing. And we want to make sure there's a real delightful interaction between parent and infant. And perhaps, again, if that hasn't been achieved, then you might engage in some Theraplay, and the focus is on the caregiver, really focusing on the child in that really intense and personal way, really making sure that your child is seen and making sure that you can maintain that engagement, staying attuned, noticing when they're wandering or not interested, and noting that and recognising that with them. And, you know, it really helps to entice and draw out the child and their personality and what's going on. And if we can be really attuned and connect to our child while also having those delightful interactions, it can have a really great impact on their emotional regulation. So let's have a look at the benefits about that. So the benefits for the child, so it allows the child to experience positive emotions with their parent. The child learns about relationships and develops interest in other people. The child feels wanted and lovable. And then they can also understand that they're actually capable of interacting in healthy, appropriate ways with other people. And the benefit to the parent is it helps them establish and maintains connection with your child, where you can focus intently on the child, entice your child into enjoying new experiences, and have opportunities for playful give and take, which leads you to being effectively attuned to your child and becoming more aware of your child's emotional cues. Okay. The third pillar is nurturing. And so this supports regulation again. It creates a secure base for the child, and it also helps to build worthiness for the child. And if we look at infant and parent relationship right from the beginning, we want to make sure that we're engaged in activities that are soothing and calming and quiet and reassuring. We want to make the world feel safe and predictable and warm and secure. And then the child's able to develop that expectation that people will actually take care of me and good things can happen to me. And perhaps if there was a disruption to that, in the Theraplay model, the caregiver meets the child's unfulfilled younger needs and helps the child learn to relax and allow him or her to be taken care of. And it helps build the inner working model that the child is actually lovable and valued. And that's a really important part, to be able to feel a really good sense of worthiness. And again, it helps them regulate their emotions as well, because if they feel worthy of being looked after and respected for the emotions that they do have, again, really good emotional regulation. This is also where I mentioned in this structure aspect, I talked about touch. So nurturing also involves some level of touch, and that's what that soothing and calming is about. And sometimes some young people actually find it really difficult to accept that touch, and also find it really difficult to give. So within the Theraplay model, it would be about supporting them and doing that in some really structured activities that help build that in a gradual basis, so the child can feel in a safe space. And here's our benefits. So the benefit for the child is the child feels safe for accepting physical care from the parent. The child develops understanding that the world is a safe, secure place where their needs will be met. The child develops trust in other people, and they they believe that they are worthy of good care, and the child learns more about healthy touch and how to be gentle with and respectful of others. And the benefit for the parent is that they become more comfortable providing physical care to the child, develop better understanding of a child's particular sensitivities to certain types of touch. It helps build trust with your child and helps you become more comfortable with touch and displaying that affection. And then the last section under the Theraplay model is challenge. And challenge is really great for supporting exploration, growth and mastery of tasks, and also having some competence and confidence. So if we look at the infant-parent relationship to start with, it's about activities that help the child extend him or herself a little bit. So that little bit of challenge, and making sure that that's appropriate to the child's level of functioning. It also allows the child to master that tension arousing experiencing. So that's around that whole idea that, yes, we might be feeling a little bit anxious about trying a task, but we want to create some growth and some confidence in them. And so allowing them to do that, and recognizing that the emotion can actually change with that. And if that was missing in that early relationship, again, within the Theraplay model, you'd engage in some activities that require partnership. It's never about activities that are being done on their own, and it's always about encouraging the child to take mild, age-appropriate risks. So in that gradual process to help build that confidence. And it's about promoting that competence and confidence. And using that to redirect resistance. So sometimes they might not feel comfortable actually doing that particular task, so bringing it back to more age appropriate or building that confidence so that they can push through any of that resistance or fear that might be happening for them. And then the benefits that come with that. So the benefits for the child is the child feels confident and competent. The child believes that he or she can safely explore and learn new things. The child learns to tolerate mild frustrations, and the child accepts and believes positive feedback. And the benefit for the parent is to learn to collaborate with the child, have fun with your child without becoming competitive. That can sometimes be tricky for parents. And build awareness of your child's triggers and how to prevent or address them in the moment. Again, that's part of that attunement. So sometimes these pillars do sort of cross over a little bit, but there are some really great activities and things that Theraplay includes to be able to build on each of those pillars wherever there might be some sort of mismatch in that between a parent and a child. I guess in that respect, I think it's also really important that sometimes poor emotional regulation is because a child may have experienced or witnessed an event that may have been a little bit traumatizing for them. And if that's the case, then I think it's really important to make sure you seek professional support around that. The framework just discussed, that Theraplay model, is actually really supportive for families to support any of those traumatized experiences that a child has that often dysregulates their emotions. And they find that really difficult to manage again without some intervention. So my suggestion would be to perhaps try and find a Theraplay therapist. And I think the other part that goes with that is making sure engaging a centre that's very much play-based. That's where we get to learn lots of those skills, and we get to have improvement across those emotional regulations and social skills when we've got lots of play going on. We learn all those social skills like taking turns and sharing and communicating if we can do it through play, which is what the Theraplay is about as well. So I think that brings us to the end of my presentation. I think I'm right on 7 o'clock, so I'm not sure if there are any questions that anyone might have. I have popped in there some references where all of that information was gathered from out of my slides as well. But I'm going to stop sharing the screen and see whether anyone has any questions.